This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Welcome, folks. This is my studio. Come on in, let's take a closer look. So originally this building had multiple purposes beyond art restoration. It was a boat building factory, organs were built here, and ultimately the egg timer, you know that little timer that sits on your grandmother's kitchen to time cooking, was built here. When I got the place, it was an empty warehouse full of garbage and other debris, and it needed to be comprehensively gutted. So we took down walls, we took down electric, HVAC, flooring, and a whole bunch of other things, including rats' nests and a couple of possums. And then we started to put it back together so that it would be suitable for my needs. And now it is my studio. This studio is approximately 6,000 square feet, and my old studio, which some of you may remember from my early videos on South Michigan Avenue, was about 1,900 square feet. So the old studio, including storage room and my little office alcove, fit in just this space. So to say that this is an improvement is an understatement. Some of the stuff that I've been able to do in this studio, I just couldn't even fathom in the old studio. There wasn't space. Some pieces couldn't even fit in the door and had to be stored out in the hallway of the old studio. And that's a story for another time. So this is the main room where I do most of the conservation. This is the main table where I suppose you could call this the operatory, where most of the paintings start their conservation process. This is the main table because it is taller, which allows me to stand while I work, and if I need to, I can sit on this very fancy chair that goes up and down. I have other tables here that I use for work. This one obviously a little bit lower. These two, which initially were supposed to be for work, have now become storage for paintings that are in process, that I have yet to propose to the clients or that are just waiting to be picked up or something. Storage is an ever-increasing issue with paintings, and so I have flat files which allow me to store materials such as fancy washi kozo. I have two types. Mat boards, other mat boards, more mat boards, some construction paper because sometimes there are small children spending time here and that's a lifesaver. But in addition, these flat files contain artwork, and sometimes artwork comes to me not on a stretcher and loose, and so it needs to be stored in a flat file. So most of these drawers contain paintings because pretty much everything in this studio contains a painting. More paintings. And a poster of Porsches. But that's another story. So over here, this is my frame storage wall, and it is not all that complex. It's a bunch of 2x4s bolted to the wall where I can keep frames when they're off of the paintings. I don't like to have them leaning up against the floor because I have learned from past experience that I tend to knock them over, and knocking over frames is not a good thing. So I keep them stored here. Oftentimes clients will come in and ask me if these are frames for sale, and I have to disappoint them and tell them no, that these all belong to paintings. But this is where I keep them when I'm not working on them or when they are not being used to frame a painting. It also provides a nice little backdrop for when I have to do announcements and talk to you kind folks. I get a lot of questions about this aluminum easel contraption. Many of you seem to like it, and so I'll tell you just a little bit about it. It is extruded aluminum made by the company 8020, and it is really just a simple two-track system, top track and bottom track. There are bearings that lock on the top and bottom and allow me to slide this easel over to wherever I want. Then there are locking bearings on these two, which allow me to move it up and down so that I can position a painting for photography, for examination. Of course, there's my color card because keeping accurate representation is super important. And this is from the American Institute of Conservation. So it's a very, very fancy, very expensive little piece of equipment that you can get on Amazon for $5. Across from my easel is my computer photography cart. And on this cart are several cameras. A regular old Nikon, a full spectrum Nikon, which makes it suitable for infrared and UV photography. The cut filter that blocks those spectrums of light has been removed from this camera, so it is now sensitive to those wavelengths. You can't take regular photos with that. They look terrible. A very old single-purpose iMac that barely works anymore, but I am loath to throw it away or recycle it because it works. Suffice it to say that this is not a perfect photography setup, and I am working to change that, and hopefully I'll be able to share that with you at some point in the future. So now we'll leave the main room and we'll go into the storage room. And I know there are tons of questions about this storage room, so I will try to answer some of them while we're here. This is my storage room. In the storage room, I have paintings, boxes, more paintings, more boxes, cardboard, more paintings, more boxes. Get the trend? Paintings, boxes, and cardboard. These boxes all contained paintings that were shipped to me, and so I saved them for return shipments. All of these paintings in this rack have been inventoried and proposed to the clients. Many of them have been approved and are just waiting their turn. Some of them have not yet been approved and are waiting that approval, and some of them have been rejected and are waiting to be picked up. I would say that in this storage room there are probably 200 or so paintings of various age, various styles, varying problems, and all of them have been cataloged, examined, and are ready for conservation should the client decide to go ahead. In addition, I have completed paintings over here. Those are wrapped up after conservation so that the clients can come pick them up. And I also have materials in this room. So if ever there was a lesson about measuring twice and cutting once, this is just a small example of that. These are stretcher bars that I, and actually mostly my father before me, mismeasured, ordered, and now have to store until a painting comes along that fits them. Tons of cardboard for packing and storing, and probably the most famous piece of artwork in the storage is this lovely little pink baby. This came to me from a collector in several pieces. It had fallen off their shelf and had broken. And I proposed it to the client, and the client approved the work. And midway through, when we reached a point where it came time to repaint, and I reached out to the client to ask what they wanted to do. Did they want me to just touch up these areas, which given the material, this is a cast fiberglass, might be impossible to make it match, or did they want this to be fully repainted? Well, the client disappeared into thin air. And I have since not been able to get in touch with the client. And this is, oh, maybe 15 years ago. Now this piece is actually by a fairly famous artist. And this is a limited edition, so number 5 out of 8. I don't know anything about this piece, but a lot of people seem to have opinions. Anyhow, more paintings. These are paintings that have been abandoned by the owners. They have either approved conservation, paid for it, and then never picked it up. They have rejected conservation and never picked it up, or they have never responded to the proposal. So these things will sit in my storage room collecting dust for years until I finally decide to do something with them. What I'll do with them, I have no idea, but that is a project for another day. In addition to this room being for storage, it is also where I do my UV photography. Ultraviolet photography requires darkness because visible light contaminates the photograph. So I can close the doors, turn off the lights, turn on these new ultraviolet lights, and I can expose the painting here, and that enables me to do the photography. This curtain on the background absorbs infrared, visible, and UV light, so it is a completely flat, black, dead curtain, meaning that there's no reflection back of any light. So it's really important because otherwise it could, again, contaminate the photograph. And you've seen me examine paintings here, and I often do that with clients to show them the old varnish, the old work that's on the painting, and to help them understand some of the nuances of the type of conservation that's required. And as we leave the storage room and pass through the area where the door is conspicuously absent because, well, I forgot to install it, we come to the office. And the first thing is this lovely napping couch where if one were to happen to get tired during work and needed to catch a little shut-eye, well, this would be the place to do it. But I assure you, there is no napping at Baumgartner Restoration. This is a place of serious business. Now over here, we come to my desk where I do a lot of client communication, analysis of images, and of course, all of my video editing, including the integration of those ads that you guys love so much. Classics such as, with real-life technical support, Squarespace won't leave you stranded if you run into an issue. Even the somewhat controversial, building websites is hard, and it takes a lot of time and expertise. But with Squarespace, it's as easy as click, click, click. And of course, the internationally famous Russian pitch. You remember, Russia, red square, square, Squarespace. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. There is no easier way to get a beautiful, modern, mobile-friendly website up and running than with Squarespace. With a few clicks, you can choose from their thousands of templates. If you need an online store, click, you can add that. If you need a gallery, click, you can add that too. And if you run into an issue, well, Squarespace has already thought of it. They have help guides and real live human technical support to walk you through whatever issues may arise. So whether it's running an online business, sharing your artwork with the world, or just having a space on the internet to call your own, to do whatever you like with it, Squarespace is the easiest way to get there. So head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Baumgartner for 10% off your first website or domain. Now, I would much rather not have an office and maybe use this as a ball pit complete with popcorn and cotton candy, but, well, this is a business. So if we come back into the main room, there are a couple of things that I'll share with you. This is my main storage for materials and solvents and equipment, and none of the stuff is terribly special. Tacks, no staples. Canvas, brushes, lots of takeout food containers. These things are fantastic. You should always find another use for them because you don't want them in a landfill. Solvents, tools that I use frequently, keys and sandpaper and stuff like that. Other equipment, I have my microscope, my stirring equipment, my hot air pen, my ultrasonic screwdriver, and of course, my ridiculous face mask. And in the front of the studio is probably where I spend the most time sitting. And that's in this chair behind the easel where I do all of my retouching. Now the retouching, as you have seen, can be some of the most frustrating work that I do, but also some of the most rewarding. And I spend a lot of time here. I have LED lights to illuminate when the light is less than perfect. And these are color calibrated so that I can change the temperature or the Kelvin of the light that's coming out of these in accordance with what my clients have in their homes or their galleries or their museums. If they tell me that they have a very warm light, maybe a 2800 Kelvin, well, I can dial that into here so that my retouching will match their environment as best as can be. There's nothing worse than doing a great job in the studio, the work going to the client's home, and the retouching looking, well, wrong because of color shift or metamerism. You remember that brown blue dress? Yeah, that thing. That happens all the time. So having color adjustable lights makes a big difference. I have paintings pretty much everywhere because this is a painting conservation studio. These paintings are all just received this week, and these need to be examined, inventoried. I need to figure out what needs to be done to them. I need to write the proposals, and then I need to send those out to the clients. So now if we head over into the other half of the studio, if this half is the clean, presentable half, this is the place where I make big messes. Now it's clean because, well, I'm showing it off and I wanted a clean house before I invited you folks over. This is not indicative of what this space normally looks like. It is usually a hot mess of tools and materials on every surface, including the floor, and me pushing those messes farther into corners so that I can avoid cleaning them up at a later date. One of the biggest assets of moving to a bigger studio was this section right here. This is a ever-evolving wood shop. I have a table saw, I have a bandsaw, I have a router table, dust collection, a miter saw, drills, wood, all sorts of equipment that I just didn't have the space for in my old studio. And this has meant that I can now work on frames, I can build supports, I can take on more complicated projects that require a level of precision that you just can't get with some hand tools. Now, I am not knocking hand tool experts. You people are a crazy breed of perfectionists who are talented beyond my wildest imagination. I am a mere amateur, so having good equipment helps me get to perfection a little bit better. Without a doubt, that is the most favorite part of my entire studio, according to my 4- and 7-year-old. So one of the other cool things about buying this building was that it came with a loading dock. Well, actually, it came with an overhead door. There was no loading dock here. I had to build this. But this has been incredibly helpful in getting things in and out of the studio. My old building was located in the South Loop, and it was a shared loading dock with a freight elevator. And for anybody who ever went to that old loading dock and elevator, I'm sorry. That must have been a terrible experience. So having this is really great. So you remember that door that's missing from my storage room? Well, it's right there, and it will probably remain there for the next several years while I ignore it because I'm too busy to install it. So this funny looking little greenhouse is not used for growing any plants. It is used for humidification and fumigation treatments. These pieces of equipment, one is just a basic humidifier, the other is a hydroxyl machine, will enable me to create an enclosed environment where I can treat paintings with precision and care. I know it doesn't look very advanced, but it actually does an incredible job with what I need. I used this contraption and the humidification tent in the restoration of the Salvator Mundi. It was really imperative to introduce humidity to make the wood more pliable, but in a controlled manner. Simply saturating the wood with water wouldn't have worked for that panel. So introducing humidity, checking on it, and keeping it in a controlled state was critical, and this facilitated it. So over here we come to the area of the studio where I do most of my varnishing, and this is my varnishing table. I have varnishes, solvents, tools, and equipment. You probably recognize this cardboard from all of my varnishing. I generally apply varnish with brush, but I also have an HVLP spray system, which allows me to apply finishes with air and give different types of finishes and different types of control. The entire studio has air running throughout it. So at various points in the studio, there are these little valves with pressure controls and air filtration to remove water, and they all run to a central compressor so that I have air wherever I am. And in this corner, we have the rolls of stuff part of the studio. I have rolls of release paper, rolls of release film, rolls of heavy PET film, rolls of light PET film, rolls of medium PET film, rolls and rolls of films, of papers, of canvas, of felt, of all sorts of weird materials that I've bought for various projects and now have left over. And I'll probably use all of this stuff at one point, but for now, it just goes into the section of the studio designated for storage of rolls. So this is without a doubt the heart of any modern conservation studio, and that is the vacuum heat table. This is a table that my father built over 40 years ago, and up until just recently worked perfectly. You may remember from my hot table build video that this table failed. Some of the electronics finally kicked the dust after 40 years of service. So I reverse engineered it, replaced those internals, and now it works again. It is a big piece of aluminum with heating blankets underneath that allows me to apply deliberate controlled heat to an object. In the corners of the table, because many of you ask, there are vacuum ports hooked up to a vacuum pump, and this allows me to extract air. So when you see me laying down cotton webbing across the table, that's to facilitate the extraction of the air. The vacuum sucks along here, and all of the air is pulled to these edges and then extracted through the hoses. Now, even though I was able to get this table back up and running and working perfectly, not having it for a couple of weeks was really, really difficult. And it made me realize just how important this piece of equipment is. And now that I had a bigger space and a couple of really large paintings, it seemed only logical to take that newfound information about how these things were built and build another one. And so this may be my most famous piece of equipment, which is kind of silly because it's just a big hunk of metal. But this is my 10-foot by 7-foot hot table. And you all know this from the video that I made. This was an incredibly fun project, but also really challenging because sourcing the parts and figuring out how to scale a small table up to a big table and do it safely was really interesting and challenging, particularly for somebody who is not a mechanical or electrical engineer. So this table enables me to work on paintings whose smallest dimension would be 10 feet. So I could work on a 10-foot by 30-foot painting in sections because this table is 10 feet long. This table doesn't get as much use as the small one because it consumes a ton of electricity, because it is nearly 9,000 watts to create the heat necessary to heat this whole table. So I use it when I have to, but generally I still go with the small one. He's my little workhorse. 9,000 watts? Did I say 9,000? I meant 1.21 gigawatts. This table over here is really just kind of an all-purpose work table, but this is where I do most of the work on frames. So you can see right here is a gorgeous little frame that came in, and it was actually a little too big for the painting, so I had to make a small liner to fit. And this is just a general purpose scrap table where I do that. I have a lot of equipment and tools over here, everything from routers and bits and circular saws and nail guns and sanders to all sorts of stuff for frame gilding and repair. Tons of gold leaf, tons of glazing equipment, all sorts of stuff that I would need to fix frames. So if you've ever suffered from needing a third hand, that is where you will find clamps to be your best friend. And the rule is that more clamps is more better. Again, another reminder of measure twice, cut once. This is the wall of shame. Shame on you, Julian. Look at all of these beautiful stretchers that have no homes. It's because I couldn't be bothered to write down the measurements on a piece of paper, and from the distance of the painting to the computer where I ordered them, somehow they went through a blender, and now I have all these stretchers with no homes. Measure twice, cut once. Paintings, 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 everywhere paintings, including some really big paintings. None of these paintings would have fit in my old studio. Literally, wouldn't have even fit in the door because they were just too big. So having a bigger studio has enabled me to take on this work, and I mean, that's really good for business, but it's also really good for my clients. If the hot table was the most famous piece of equipment I have, it's getting a run for its money with this piece right here. You'll remember this from the epic 5-part series concerning that Dutch panel. This was a purpose-built piece of equipment designed to solve a specific problem. I had been thinking about this equipment for probably 15 years, but had never come to a situation where I could justify the cost, expense, the time, the hassle of actually building it. But when that Dutch panel painting came in, well, I had a problem and a solution. Again, this is built with extruded aluminum, and I 3D printed a lot of parts for it, scoured various manufacturers to find handles and knobs and swivel feet and all sorts of pieces to make this come together, including a hydraulic lift so that I don't have to crawl on the floor when I need to get under the painting. And initially, when I built the table, I figured I'd use it a bunch, but really it was for that one painting. Well, I have used this probably no fewer than 50 times in the past 6 months, and so it has proven invaluable. So this is a unique, one-of-a-kind piece of equipment. I'm the only one in the world who has one. And no, my client did not foot the bill for the cost of this tool. You know, come to think of it, I should probably find a name for this piece of equipment. I mean, it is pretty special, and it took a lot of effort. So cracking a bottle of champagne and christening it seems appropriate. But whatever shall I name it? So Jack, Chicago Aussie, who's filming this, hi Jack, told me not to mention the bathroom because he said, nobody wants to see your bathroom, that's stupid. And I said, but there's a bathroom and we're doing a shop tour, so I'll mention it. So that's the bathroom. You can cut that out if you want. I'm sure Jack's gonna tell me not to mention the kitchen either, but this is the kitchen. I have absolutely no need for a kitchen. I don't cook risotto here in the studio, but the refrigerator holds important things like glues and gesso and some food and my lunch. And of course, really important, the freezer holds Pedialyte pops for when the little ones are here sick. So this part of the studio is really unexciting. This is where I package paintings. I wrap them and put them into their frames. Again, this is a padded table with some linen canvas on it so that the paintings don't get scratched or damaged. And then all sorts of little pieces of hardware to help facilitate getting those paintings into those frames and not using glue or screws or the bad word staples. So more storage, equipment, materials, all sorts of stuff. I don't use this stuff all that often, which is why it's back here. And since its appearance in my most recent videos, it has been the source of more questions probably than it should be. So I will now introduce you to my 1977 Porsche 911S. So call it a father's cruel joke, but when I was a little kid, my dad introduced me to the single greatest car ever made by man, and that is the Porsche 911. And since that day, I have judged every vehicle against that car, which is really unfair to all the other vehicles, but also completely correct. And so as a little kid, I wanted one of these cars. As a young man, I wanted one. As an adult, I wanted one. And so this past year, when I had the opportunity to purchase one, I jumped on it. So it is a 1977 911S. And aside from a few modifications that I have begun doing to it, a new radio, a new steering wheel, improving the shifting, the car is pretty much as delivered. The old owners, I'm the third, never really did anything to it, including driving it, because it's only got 54,000 miles on it. Now, I intend on making this car my daily driver. It cannot fit car seats, so I won't be hauling kids around, but it definitely can handle groceries, trips to the hardware store, and just about every other driving duty that one would expect from a car, just with more fun. And so, yes, while I am doing some tinkering on this car and will do some modifications, this is not going to be a video. I am way in over my head when it comes to cars, and I'm working with some smarter people who actually know what they're doing. This is not going to end up on my channel. So, aside from maybe making some cameos and this feature, this is probably the last you're going to see and hear of it. So that's the studio. Thank you for coming inside and taking a look at where I spend all of my day working and plying my craft. If anything changes about the space or the equipment or really anything, I'm sure I'll update you with another video. Anyhow, thanks for coming and see you guys later. It's over. There's nothing else. Go.